Welcome to Train... Stop laughing every time! Welcome to Train Freediving. You're on the sofa with Sarah and Nathan, and this is my pool competition training vlog number 2. So coach, what did we do today?
Today I had you do 3 static plus dynamics. So you held your breath for 30 seconds, and then after the 30-second breath hold without taking a breath, you did a 75 to 90 meter swim. So the first 2 were supposed to be 75, 75, and then 90, but you ended up doing 75, 85, 90, all with 30 seconds. And then after that workout, then you did a reverse CO2 table, just like the last time, but only for 1 repetition. So reps of 30 with 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 breaths between.
And what was the objective of today's training for me at this stage in my training cycle?
So really the static dynamics were kind of for me, just to see where your breath hold is. I wanted to see how you were feeling with certain total dive times, and I wanted to tell whether you're having contractions, if you were having any type of sign of hypoxia like blue lips. And for me, that was gonna give me a gauge as to whether or not, basically it was gonna tell me which type of training we needed to add in to correct any issues. But the good thing was I didn't really see any problems. So you weren't really having any contractions or urge to breathe on any of the laps, even with the 30 seconds plus 90. Your lips were pink the entire time, so no sign of hypoxia. And you even did the table quite easily while you were cold. So on the last rep, you were saying you were already a little bit cold, and you still did it fine. So for me, breath hold wise, everything's looking good. Technique's looking good. And then to finish the answer, putting in that CO2 table at the end, I still need you to maintain some degree of higher volume in the session. So it was lower than last time, but it was still just another way to get you in some laps and really just improve the quality of your improve your ability to do short distances with short recoveries, which is going to come into play a bit later on in the training.
Yeah, I really, from my side of things, really enjoyed today's session. I had yesterday was my first day back in the gym for, I don't know, maybe 8 months or something, maybe longer. And so I worked on my legs, and I was worried that I would be suffering for it a bit today. And I wasn't in the pool, but now I definitely am. But otherwise, I really enjoyed the whole session. I always love doing a long swim, and I find doing static dynamic really relaxing because it just triggers my dive response a lot earlier. So yeah, the 30-second static followed by 75 to 90 meter dynamic, I didn't have any urge to breathe, and I didn't have any sense of hypoxia, which was really good. I think on my first lap I mentioned I was having a slight tweak with my lower back, and as I mentioned in the last video, because I have a back injury, I have to monitor that during my dynamic with the monofin to just check in and have that self-awareness of maybe making slight tweaks. And when I mentioned this to Nathan and said that I was feeling a slight lock up in my lower back, which sometimes can happen with me because my vertebra can just move into different positions. What was your advice that you gave me?
The first bit of advice was to be aware that you might need to stop the session. So I always want to make sure that if there is anything causing Sarah pain, and I would say that this would apply to everyone, if you're having a particularly bad session, it's not necessarily worth finishing. So that was the first thing, was kind of giving you permission to stop if you needed to. But then
It wasn't that bad. It was just
yeah.
And he, like, I think you were right to check in about like how bad that was and give me that permission, because I think we can all fall into that trap where, you know, maybe we push ourselves too hard. But in that instance, I definitely was just noticing more of a lockup than normal, but it wasn't painful. So yeah, if anything's painful or like really uncomfortable, don't do it. But you know, otherwise you might just need to make some tweaks. So what was the other advice?
Well, I think the other bit of advice kind of came by accident, because you did do a second. You went for the second lap to see whether or not things were feeling better, and then you said that you didn't really plan it, but you ended up pushing your arms, like kind of extending your arms above your head a little bit more than normal.
I was more just see if I could do it here, but I was more stretching forward a bit more, and maybe normally I'm a bit more like that, but this time I kind of stretched forward. That was a terrible example of what I did. Yeah,
that was horrible.
Do that.
Basically, what she was doing was slightly lifting her shoulders into a more supportive position at the top of the kick. And I was saying that this is something that I haven't understood really how to apply to freediving. But when you watch fin swimmers, they actually, their shoulders move up and down through the kick. So in the back kick, the shoulders kind of drop to give a little bit more flexibility in the core. And then for the front kick to give more power, they sort of reach further ahead of themselves. And then that cycle kind of happens where their arms are moving back and forth. And I said it made sense that you felt that, and it would be something to play around with for the rest of the session to see if keeping your kind of pushing yourself forward could give a bit more support into your spine. And then from your perspective, it did work out that way.
Yeah, I certainly found just by lengthening more my arms forward, but without tension, you know, I wasn't like really crazy stretching, but just adding a little bit more of lengthening, I found that I had that extra level of support, and I was getting that space that I needed maybe between my vertebrae, whereas before maybe I was locking it out slightly. But I think that's the really important thing, even during that exercise, which does require quite a level of focus for me, doing 30 seconds followed by like 85 meter dynamic. I can't just be thinking too much about my technique, but there is that room to be aware of it, and I still try and have that level of awareness whatever distance I'm doing, so I can always relax into a more comfortable position, a more protective position, and then as a result relax more. Yeah. So one thing probably that I was a bit naughty on in that exercise was Nathan did tell me to do 3 times static dynamic. Each of the static dynamic I was doing in a static of 30 seconds, but he then said that I could do for the first 2 between 75 and 80, and then the last one I could do between I think it was like 85 and 90. But I did the first one and I did 30 seconds followed by 75 meter dynamic, but then when I did the second one I was having a lovely time, enjoying my dive and kind of also playing around a little bit with my technique, and I ended up doing 30 seconds plus around 87 meters dynamic. And when I came up, after I'd had my recovery, coach gave me a bit of a slap on the hand. And why did you do that, coach?
Yeah, so the first reason, or I would say that the general reason, is that because you're not taking control of your training and you're giving me all the responsibility of it, I need to make sure that everything's building up correctly, that all of the it's not just a random training session. All of the training sessions work together to get you from where you are now to try and prepare you for your role. And particularly because I've been training with you for so long, I really know how much volume per session you're capable of, how an extra 5 meters on one dive isn't negatively affect the quality of the next dive. Yeah. So I'm being very careful and very particular with how many meters you're supposed to be doing before and after and during the sessions to make sure everything works. And I'd say that it was quite noticeable that on your 90, there was a bit of like weaving back and forth and a little bit less control in the technique, which, in my opinion, if you done 275s and then 90, it probably wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
So that just those extra 10 meters makes a big difference. And I would say that kind of comment or that advice is going to apply to anyone out there who is working with a coach or working with a distance coach, or who has some type of trainer who's designing their training for them. Hopefully, your training is following some type of plan. So the person doing it for you should have a good idea of how all the sessions are building together. And deviating too much on each session could throw off a workout that you're supposed to do 2 weeks from now because you've done a little bit too much right now.
And it's, obviously, like me, it's easy to do. I'm like, I come up and he's like, you didn't do 75 meters. And I'm like, yeah, but I was feeling really good, and it was only an extra, like, I don't know what it was, 10 meters, so what's the big deal, right? And, actually, one of the best ways to put this in perspective was in my training cycle last year, because I was in a peaking phase, which is, that week or 2 weeks before your performance dive, in my case, a competition. And I was having a bit of, like, I guess, mental wobble, and didn't really maybe want to admit that to myself. I'd been feeling maybe a bit more tired than I would have liked, and I guess I was a little bit nervous about whether I was going to be able to perform these longer swims that I needed to do ahead of my target dive. And Nathan had told me just before the session that my target goal was, what was it again?
130.
And my target goal was 130 meters. He just wanted me to do 130 meters. I got in the pool, and in my head I was like, okay, well, I'll do 130 meters, but if I'm feeling good, then I think I'll try and do more, which is the wrong approach, because, as I said, as he said, he's taken responsibility for my diving, not me. He's got a plan and a program, not me. And whether a coach is doing your programming or you're doing your programming yourself, the reason why you create that program is because you're trying to work up to a performance in the safest, most efficient and effective way, right? But we can all get in our own heads. So anyway, I got in the water, I was feeling quite good, and I set off for my dive. Again, everything was going well. We've got a 30-meter pool, as we said before, so I turned at 120, and en route to the 130, I thought, I've got this, I want to go further. So I passed the 130 mark, I passed the 140 mark, and I could see the end of the pool, which was 150, and I said, I'm going for it. And I think I was really anxious to hit that target, because that was something that I really wanted to achieve in order to go on and do my other result. Anyway, so I came up at 150, and as a result of not being quite ready and my nervous system not being ready for that performance yet, I did actually suffer a small, very small LMC, and that kind of put an end to my target goal that I had in that competition, because we had to take my performance right back. And you weren't very happy with me, were you? And I wasn't very happy with myself.
Yeah. Obviously, I wasn't like upset with you or mad or anything. I was super mad. No, I wasn't. But I think it's more, I guess, disappointment for you, because I knew that you were probably capable of turning at 150 in the competition. Maybe doing 155 or 157, something like that. And I think, like what Sarah didn't say was that dive was only her second long swim in the entire training cycle. So she went from like training up to 100 meters to going from 100 to 120 to 150 in 2 dives.
Yeah, it was a little
so
bit
yeah, it was just for me, like, had you done the 2 reps at 130 that I needed you to do, then you probably would have made the neurological changes that you needed to be capable of more. And to go back to what we were talking about with today, something that I know I need to be a little bit more controlling of is preventing you from doing any type of last minute variation on your training dives, because even though you can add 10 meters or add 15 meters to a training dive, it's fly season in Dahab.
So annoying.
Yeah, so even though you can add 5 to 15 meters on a training dive, if you get used to making that variation on your own now, then when it comes time to peaking, we're going to have this like culture of variation where I need you doing exactly what you should be doing every single time, so that through the entire cycle you're hitting the distances that you have to, and not more, not less.
And I totally get that now, actually, and I think up until that point of when I did that 150 mistake, I'd been a bit like, I'll go along with it, but I didn't really understand like why. And I think when I did do that, and then as a result, like mentally, like felt like I didn't want to go there again, I really realised why he'd been trying to prevent that from happening. Because as soon as you have a negative experience, or as soon as you encounter some sort of mental block, it's very hard to then feel confident in that dive that's coming up. So preparing and taking things step by step and building up slowly is the safest way to achieve like longer and deeper distances, because it's just much more enjoyable. Of course, maybe I could have continued to do some training in that week leading up to my competition, and probably got to 150 again, but it wouldn't have felt good, and I probably would have had some sort of anxiety around doing that distance again, and that's really, really what you want to avoid, and that's what I'm now really realising I want to avoid, and it's all too easy to get a bit overexcited and think, I just want to see what I'm capable of, which is kind of what I do, and then you make these kind of mistakes that affect you in the long term. So I know I'm saying this, and today I was naughty, but I guess it's just, he's right to give me that kind of reality check again, and I need to be clear with myself as well to not make those mistakes again, because I really want to achieve my target dive. Yeah, so this week was slightly early actually, because I'm having a lovely trip on Saturday, so I won't be around then to do the vlog, but I am doing a training day on Saturday, so we'll pick up the vlogs again from a week on Saturday, so look out for those. And yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope that you're enjoying On the Sofa with us.